I've always had a complicated relationship with charity galas. It's not that I don't believe in giving back. I do, with every piece of my heart. But galas, with their glittering facades and whispered judgments, have a way of peeling back the masks people wear, revealing who they are when the spotlight's on. And let me tell you, on that crisp October evening in Seattle, I saw my husband Lucas, for exactly who he'd become. My name's Scarlett, and this is the story of the night I stopped being invisible. Before we dive in, if you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, I'd love for you to hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon to stay updated with all our latest stories. Your support means the world. If you find this video valuable, please give it a like. I'm curious to know where you're watching from. Drop your city in the comments below. Our community can't wait to connect with you. Now, let's get into the story. The venue was breathtaking. A grand ballroom draped in gold and crystal, chandeliers casting a warm glow over tables set with orchids and champagne flutes. Seattle's elite mingled in tailored suits and shimmering gowns, their laughter rising above the soft jazz humming through the air. I stood near the edge of the room, cradling my 9-month-old daughter Zoe, who was dressed in a tiny velvet outfit that made her look like a doll. Her dark curls bounced as she gnawed on her fist, oblivious to the tension knotting my stomach. I was exhausted. Zoe had been fussy all week, and I hadn't slept more than 4 hours a night. But Lucas had insisted we attend. "This is my firm's biggest event," he'd said, his voice firm, leaving no room for debate. "We show up, Scarlett." End of story. Lucas adjusted his tie in that smooth, practiced way of his hazel eyes scanning the room with the confidence of a man who knew he belonged. He was a rising star at his law firm, the kind of attorney who could charm a judge or dismantle a witness with a smile. Tonight, he was in his element, shaking hands, tossing out witty remarks that drew easy laughs. I watched him, my silver gown catching the light, a dress he'd picked out, claiming it suited the occasion. My auburn hair was pinned up tightly, hiding the frayed edges of my nerves. I'd practiced my smile in the hotel mirror until it looked effortless, but inside, I felt like I was unraveling. Zoe squirmed, and I shifted her to my hip, my arm aching from her weight. I reached for Lucas's hand, hoping for a moment of connection, something to ground me in this sea of strangers. My fingers brushed his, and he flinched, actually flinched, like I'd startled him. He leaned close, his breath warm against my ear. But his words were ice. "Don't mess this up, Scarlett," he whispered, his voice low enough that only I could hear. "You're just a prop tonight. Smile, look pretty, and stay out of the way." The words landed like a slap, sharp and sudden, stealing the air from my lungs. Just a prop. I forced a laugh, light and hollow, praying no one noticed the way my face froze. My eyes darted to the other wives across the room, polished, poised, their diamonds catching the light. Were they props too? Did their husbands whisper things that hollowed them out, leaving only skin and smiles? I blinked hard, willing myself not to cry. Not here. Not now. Lucas moved on, clapping a colleague on the shoulder, his laugh booming as if he hadn't just reduced me to nothing. I adjusted Zoe's blanket, my hands trembling, and tried to focus on the clink of glasses, the murmur of small talk. But his words echoed, each syllable carving deeper. Just a prop. I wasn't his partner tonight, not even his wife, just a decorative piece to complete the picture of his perfect life. Then something shifted. Michael, a senior partner with kind eyes and a graying beard, approached us, his wife trailing behind. "Scarlett, it's good to see you," he said warmly, glancing at Zoe. "She's a beauty, just like her mom." I smiled, genuinely this time, grateful for his kindness. He paused, then added, "We'd love for you to say a few words later, if you're up for it. Share a story about Lucas, maybe? You know him best." My stomach twisted. Speak? In front of all these people? Lucas's head snapped toward me, his expression unreadable for a moment before he forced a chuckle. "She doesn't need to, Michael," he said, his tone more command than suggestion. "Scarlett's got her hands full with Zoe tonight." But Michael waved him off. "Nonsense. I'm sure she's got something worth hearing." He winked at me, oblivious to the storm brewing under my skin. I nodded, my throat tight, and glanced at Lucas. His smile was still there, but his eyes were hard, a silent warning. Don't embarrass me. I held Zoe closer, her warmth steadying me, and felt a spark of something I hadn't in months, defiance. Maybe I was a prop to him, but I was still Scarlett. And tonight, I wasn't sure I could stay quiet. The ballroom seemed to shrink as I stood there, the microphone cold in my hand, its weight heavier than I'd expected. My heart thudded so loudly I could barely hear the jazz fade into silence. Every eye in the room was on me, hundreds of them, glittering under the chandeliers like stars judging my every move. Lucas sat 3 tables away, his posture rigid, his smile a thin line that didn't reach his eyes. Zoe was with his cousin now, asleep in her arms, her tiny chest rising and falling, oblivious to the storm I was about to unleash. I hadn't planned this, hadn't even wanted to speak, but Michael's kind insistence had pushed me to my feet, and something inside me, something raw and restless, refused to sit back down. I cleared my throat, the sound sharp in the quiet. Thank you, Michael, for this chance. I started, my voice softer than I meant it to be. I paused, steadied myself, and tried again. I'm Scarlett, Lucas's wife. It's an honor to be here, celebrating your firm's work. Polite nods rippled through the crowd. I glanced at Lucas, his jaw tight, and felt a surge of something reckless. You know, I met Lucas 6 years ago, I said, forcing a smile. He was charming, ambitious. The kind of man who made you believe in big dreams. I thought we'd build a life together. Coffee on rainy Sundays, late-night talks about baby names, someone to hold your hand when you're bone-tired and your dress smells like spit-up. A few women chuckled softly, their faces softening with recognition. I gripped the mic tighter. That's what you imagine, isn't it? When you say, I do, you picture a partnership. Equals. But sometimes, my voice wavered and I swallowed hard. Sometimes you wake up years later and realize you're not a partner anymore. You're something else. Something less. The room went still, forks pausing midair, glasses forgotten on tables. Lucas tilted his head, a warning flicker in his eyes. But I couldn't stop now. Tonight, I said, my voice clearer, I was told I'm just a prop. Smile. Look pretty, stay out of the way. And I've been that prop for a long time, too long. Gasps sliced through the silence, sharp and scattered. A woman at a nearby table covered her mouth, her diamond bracelet catching the light. I locked eyes with Lucas, his face pale, his hands clenched on the tablecloth. I'm done fading, I said, the words spilling out like a vow. I'm not just here to hold a baby or fill a seat. I'm Scarlett, and I'm still here, even if some people wish I'd disappear. The room felt electric, every whisper and rustle amplified. I wanted to say more, to unravel every quiet cruelty, but my hands were shaking, the mic slick with sweat. Before I could continue, Lucas stood, his chair scraping loudly. Scarlett's exhausted, he said, his voice smooth but edged with panic. It's been a long week with Zoe. Let's get you some air, honey. His smile was a performance, meant to charm the crowd, but I saw the fury beneath it. He took a step toward me, and my stomach lurched. He was going to pull me off the stage, spin this into a story of a tired wife losing her grip. Then a voice cut through the tension. Let her speak. It was Hannah, a colleague's wife, her auburn hair swept back, her eyes fierce. She sat near the front, her arms crossed, daring anyone to interrupt. A murmur of agreement followed, soft, but enough to shift the air. Hannah's husband shot her a look, but she didn't flinch. Her defiance lit something in me, a spark I hadn't felt in years. I nodded at her, my voice steadier now. Thank you, I said, then turned back to the crowd. This isn't about airing dirty laundry. It's about truth. We all wear masks at events like this, don't we? But when you're told to shrink, to be less, it's not just one night. It's every day. So here's my wish for all of us. Don't let anyone make you feel like you're just a prop. You're more than that. Always. The silence held for a moment, heavy and profound, before a few hands clapped, tentative at first, then louder. Not everyone joined, but it was enough. I handed the mic back to Michael, who looked stunned but managed a nod. My legs felt like water as I stepped off the stage, avoiding Lucas's gaze. I reached for Zoe, her warmth anchoring me, and made my way to a quiet hallway near the coat check, the hum of the Gala fading behind me. Lucas found me there minutes later, his footsteps sharp against the marble floor. "What the hell was that?" he hissed, his eyes wild but his voice low, controlled. "You just humiliated me in front of my entire firm." I held Zoe closer, her soft breath steadying me. "No," I said quietly, meeting his gaze. I reminded them I exist. His nostrils flared, his hands flexing at his sides. "Go home, Scarlett. We'll deal with this later." He didn't wait for a reply, didn't offer to help with Zoe. He turned and strode back to the ballroom, his silhouette swallowed by the golden light. I stood there, alone except for my daughter, and felt the first crack in the cage I'd lived in for too long. I wasn't free yet, but I'd spoken. And that was a start. The drive home from the gala was silent, the kind of silence that presses against your chest, thick and unyielding. Zoe slept in her car seat, her tiny snores the only sound cutting through the hum of the engine. Lucas stared straight ahead, his hands tight on the wheel, his jaw locked like he was holding back a storm. I kept my eyes on the passing streetlights, their glow blurring into streaks of gold, and replayed every word I'd said on that stage. Part of me expected him to explode, to tear into me the moment we were alone, but he didn't. That scared me more. His quiet was a weapon, sharper than any shout. Morning came too soon. I woke to the smell of coffee and the clatter of Lucas in the kitchen, pouring himself a mug like it was just another Saturday. He kissed Zoe's forehead as she gummed a piece of banana in her high chair, then scrolled through his phone, his face calm, unreadable. I stood by the sink, scrubbing a pan that was already clean, waiting for the fallout that had to come. But he acted like nothing had happened, like I hadn't stood in front of his colleagues and called out the truth. "My parents are coming by tomorrow," he said finally, not looking up. "Don't bring up last night. They don't need the drama." His voice was flat, a command wrapped in casualness, and it stung worse than if he'd yelled. I nodded, my throat tight, and turned back to the dishes. The water was scalding, but I didn't flinch. I felt hollow, like the spark I'd found on that stage had flickered out overnight, smothered by the weight of his indifference. I glanced at Zoe, her chubby hands smearing fruit across her tray, and promised myself I'd hold on to that spark for her. For us. I hadn't always been this shadow of myself. When I met Lucas, he was magnetic. Sharp suits, quick wit, the kind of man who could make a crowded room feel like it was just the two of us. He'd sit with me at coffee shops, sketching silly cartoons on napkins to make me laugh, noticing the way I'd twist my hair when I was nervous. He'd promised me a life of adventure, of partnership. But after Zoe came, that man disappeared. He'd roll his eyes when I was too tired to cook, leave me to handle midnight feedings alone, laugh when I asked for help with a diaper. "You're the pro, Scarlett," he'd say like it was a compliment. It wasn't. It was abandonment dressed up as a joke. By the time his parents arrived the next afternoon, I'd pasted on the smile I'd perfected over months. Bright, empty, the kind that hides everything. Caroline, his mother, swept in with a bottle of wine and a hug that felt more like protocol than warmth. His father, Robert, nodded at me, already distracted by Zoe's babbling. We sat in the living room, sunlight streaming through the windows, and made small talk about the weather, the firm, Zoe's new tooth. Then Caroline sipped her wine and said, "You were quite bold at the gala, Scarlett. People are still talking about that speech." Her tone was light, but there was an edge to it, a polite disapproval that cut deeper than criticism. Lucas's jaw flexed, his eyes flicking to me for the first time all day. I forced a smile, my hands folded tightly in my lap. "I just spoke from the heart," I said, keeping my voice even. "Sometimes that stirs things up." Caroline raised an eyebrow. "Well, it was memorable, I'll give you that. Very candid." She glanced at Lucas, who offered a tight smile and changed the subject to a case he was working on. I sat there, the perfect wife again, nodding along, but inside, I was screaming. Candid. As if I'd been reckless, not honest. I wondered if Caroline had ever spoken out, ever dared to be more than a prop in her own marriage. Probably not. In their family, women were taught to smile through the cracks, to polish them until they shone. After they left, Lucas didn't speak to me for hours. He watched a game on TV, his feet propped up, while I bathed Zoe, sang her to sleep, and wiped down the counters. It was like I didn't exist, or worse, like I was supposed to vanish until he needed something. At midnight, I found him in his study, the door half open, the glow of his laptop casting shadows across his face. He was staring at my open email, a draft to a freelance client I'd forgotten to close. "What's this?" he asked, his voice low, holding up the screen like it was evidence of a crime. My stomach dropped. I'd been dabbling in marketing gigs again, small things to feel like myself, but I hadn't told him. I couldn't. "Just a side project," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Something to keep busy." His eyes narrowed, searching mine. "You're sneaking around now? What else are you hiding, Scarlett?" I forced a shrug, my heart racing. "Nothing. Just trying to stay sharp." He didn't believe me. I could see it in the way his mouth tightened, the way he leaned back in his chair, cataloging my every word. "Get some sleep," he said finally, shutting the laptop with a click that echoed in the quiet. "You look tired." I walked away, my hands trembling, and locked myself in the bathroom, staring at my reflection. The woman in the mirror wasn't a prop, wasn't tired. She was awake. And she was done pretending. I whispered to Zoe's sleeping form through the monitor, "I meant every word last night." And I did. The truth was out, and there was no going back. The days after the gala felt like walking on a tightrope, every step deliberate, every breath measured. Lucas's silence had shifted into something heavier, less indifferent, more watchful. He'd linger in doorways, his eyes tracking me as I folded Zoe's onesies or stirred oatmeal on the stove. I kept my face neutral, my voice light, but inside, my pulse raced. I'd cracked open a door by speaking out, and now I had to decide whether to step through it. For Zoe's sake, for my own, I knew I couldn't stay in this cage much longer. I started small, reclaiming pieces of myself in secret. Late at night, after Zoe was asleep, I'd pull out my laptop and work on freelance marketing gigs, logos for a local bakery, social media posts for a yoga studio. They paid pennies, but each project felt like a brick in a foundation I was building, one Lucas couldn't touch. I opened a separate bank account, depositing $200 from a client who'd overpaid by mistake. It wasn't much, but staring at that balance felt like holding a lifeline. I hid the statements in a folder labeled recipes, buried deep in my email, and checked them when Lucas was at work, my hands shaking with a mix of fear and thrill. One morning, as I rocked Zoe in her nursery, my phone buzzed with a message from Chloe, an old college friend I hadn't spoken to in years. "Saw your name on a client's website," she wrote. "You're still designing?" "In town next week, coffee." My stomach tightened. Lucas didn't like me meeting people from my past, especially women who reminded me of who I'd been before him. Bold, creative, unafraid. But I typed back, "Yes. Let's do it," before I could overthink it. I needed someone to see me, really see me, even if it was just for an hour. We met at a small cafe near the library, its windows fogged with autumn chill. Chloe looked almost the same, wavy blonde hair, sharp smile, her laugh loud enough to turn heads. "You look great," she said, hugging me, but her eyes lingered, searching. "Tired but good." "Motherhood," I said with a smile, sipping my latte to hide the tremor in my hands. Zoe dozed in her stroller, a soft anchor beside me. We talked about old times, college art classes, late-night pizza runs, until the conversation turned to me. I gave her the polished version, Lucas's job, Zoe's milestones, our quiet life. But Chloe wasn't fooled. "You seem trapped," she said quietly, stirring her tea. "Like you're holding your breath." "You okay, Scarlett?" I froze, the question piercing through my defenses. For a moment, I wanted to tell her everything. The gala, Lucas's words, the way I felt like a ghost in my own home. Instead, I said, "I'm trying to get back to myself. Thinking about leaving, maybe." Her eyes softened, no judgment, just understanding. "If you need a way out, I can help. My agency's hiring remote designers. You were always brilliant. Don't let anyone dim that. I can float your name." I blinked, stunned. "You'd do that?" "Already planning to," she said with a grin. "Send me your portfolio." I mean it. That night, I couldn't sleep, Chloe's words echoing like a promise. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, imagining a life where I wasn't just Lucas's wife, Zoe's mom. A life where I was Scarlett again. But then I checked my phone, and my blood ran cold. An app one hadn't downloaded, something called Lifeguard, was installed, its icon glaring from my home screen. I opened it, my fingers clumsy, and saw its permissions. GPS, messages, call logs. Everything. Lucas had been tracking me. Panic clawed at my chest. I deleted it immediately, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. Then I checked Zoe's stroller, where I'd hidden a folder with bank details and job applications. It was gone. The space under the liner was empty, just a stray pacifier left behind. Lucas wasn't just watching. He was closing in, tightening the leash I'd dared to slip. I didn't cry. I couldn't afford to. The next morning, I sent Chloe my portfolio, my heart pounding as I hit send. 2 days later, I got an email from her agency, inviting me to a Zoom interview. I set up in the guest room, the one place Lucas rarely entered, and wore a blouse I hadn't touched since before Zoe was born. The interviewer, Sarah, was warm, focused, asking about my approach to branding, my instincts for storytelling. For 30 minutes, I wasn't a prop. I was a professional, my voice steady, my ideas alive. Chloe's recommendation carries weight, Sarah said as we wrapped up. We'll be in touch soon. I logged off, my chest tight with something I hadn't felt in years, hope. Zoe stirred in her crib, and I lifted her, humming softly as I paced the room. I didn't have the job yet, but I had a chance. A spark. And that was enough to keep going, to start planning for a life beyond these walls, even as Lucas's shadow loomed closer than ever. Lucas's eyes were different now, sharper, like a predator tracking a shift in the wind. He'd stopped snapping at me, stopped dismissing me outright. Instead, he hovered, his presence a quiet pressure that followed me from room to room. He'd bring home roses, their petals too perfect, and set them in a vase with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. For you, he'd say, his voice soft, but it wasn't kindness. It was a test. I smiled back, careful not to flinch, and kept my answers short, my movements predictable. Every day felt like a chess game, and I was running out of moves. One evening, as I tucked Zoe into her crib, Lucas leaned against the nursery door, watching me. You've been busy, he said, casual but pointed. Always running errands lately. I smoothed Zoe's blanket, my heart thudding. Just the usual, I replied, keeping my tone light. Groceries, diapers. He nodded, but his gaze lingered, cataloging my every gesture. Later, I overheard him on the phone with my mother, his voice low, concerned. Scarlett's been overwhelmed, he said. Working too much, pulling away. I'm worried she's not herself. My stomach churned. I called my mom the next day, catching her before she could worry further. I'm fine, I said, my voice firm. Don't listen to him. She hesitated, her tone gentle but uncertain. He just sounded so worried, honey. Maybe slow down, talk to someone. I hung up, my hands shaking. Lucas wasn't just controlling me. He was rewriting my story, planting seeds of doubt in case I ever tried to leave. But I was moving faster now, building my escape in secret. The call from Sarah came a week after my interview. A part-time remote job with Chloe's agency, flexible hours, enough to cover rent and Zoe's needs. I accepted on the spot, my voice steady despite the tears prickling my eyes. I contacted a women's resource center, speaking in hushed tones while Lucas was at work. The coordinator, Layla, gave me a list of shelters, legal aid contacts, safety tips. You're not alone, she said, and I clung to those words like a lifeline. I hid bank statements in Zoe's toy box, taped beneath a stuffed bear, and started selling old clothes online, stashing every dollar in my hidden account. Then, one night, everything unraveled. I was in the garage, checking Zoe's stroller for a lost rattle, when Lucas appeared, his silhouette blocking the light from the house. He held up a cheap plastic phone, my burner, the one I'd bought with cash at a gas station. I'd hidden it in a shoebox, buried under winter boots, but there it was, dangling from his fingers. Who's this for? He asked, his voice low, almost amused. My mouth went dry, my mind scrambling. It's for work, I lied, forcing my voice to stay even. Client emergencies. He smirked, stepping closer, the phone glinting in his hand. Don't test me, Scarlett. You're not as clever as you think. He tossed it onto the workbench, the clatter echoing in the quiet, and walked back inside without another word. I stood frozen, my breath shallow, knowing I didn't have days left, maybe not even hours. At 2 a.m., with Zoe's soft snores filling the nursery, I made my move. Lucas was asleep, his breathing steady, but I didn't trust the stillness. I grabbed the emergency bag I'd packed, diapers, wipes, clothes, my hidden documents, and slipped into Zoe's room. I wrapped her in a blanket, her warmth grounding me, and crept toward the back door, avoiding the creaky floorboard by the kitchen. The night air was sharp, biting through my sweatshirt as I buckled Zoe into her car seat, my hands trembling but deliberate. I slid behind the wheel, the emergency bag in the trunk, the burner phone preloaded with the shelter's address. The engine purred softly, and I exhaled, daring to believe I'd made it. Then headlights flashed, stark and blinding, cutting through the darkness. Lucas's car was in the driveway, blocking my path, his figure looming behind the wheel. He stepped out, barefoot, his face a mask of calm fury. Going somewhere, he called, his voice carrying across the lawn. My heart slammed against my ribs. I didn't think, I acted. I yanked the gear into reverse, the tires screeching as I swerved onto the grass, the car lurching over the curb. Lucas shouted my name, his voice raw, desperate, but I didn't look back. I floored the gas, the world blurring past, streetlights, sleeping houses, the glow of traffic signals. Every red light felt like a trap, every shadow a threat, but I kept driving, Zoe stirring faintly in the back. The shelter's address glowed on my burner phone, a beacon in the dark. At 2:47 a.m., I pulled into the lot, my knuckles white on the wheel. Layla met me at the door, her eyes kind but urgent, and led us inside without a word. She handed me a key to a room with a lock, a portable crib for Zoe, a promise of safety. I laid Zoe down, her tiny fist curled against her cheek, and sank onto the bed, my body trembling with adrenaline and relief. Lucas was behind me, but I was ahead of him now. For the first time in years, I closed my eyes without fear, knowing we were almost free. The shelter was a quiet haven, its walls soft with the hum of safety, a stark contrast to the chaos I'd left behind. Zoe slept soundly in her portable crib, her breath steady, her tiny hand clutching a corner of her blanket. I sat on the narrow bed, the key to our room heavy in my palm, and let the weight of what I'd done settle over me. I'd walked away. No, I'd run, tearing free from Lucas's grip, from the life that had tried to erase me. The future was uncertain, a tangle of legal battles and hard choices, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid of it. I was Scarlett, and I was enough. Layla, the coordinator, checked on us that first morning, her voice gentle as she handed me a cup of tea. "You're safe here," she said, and I believed her. She connected me with Allison, a lawyer whose sharp eyes and warm handshake made me feel seen. Allison didn't sugarcoat things. Custody would be messy. Lucas would fight dirty, but she laid out a plan, methodical and fierce. "You've got proof," she said, nodding at the documents I'd salvaged. Bank statements, job contracts, screenshots of Lucas's text dismissing me. "We'll build a case. You focus on you and Zoe." I nodded, my throat tight, and held Zoe a little closer, her warmth a reminder of why I'd fought. Weeks passed in a blur of small victories. I started my job with Chloe's agency, designing campaigns from a borrowed laptop, my fingers rediscovering their rhythm. Zoe thrived at the shelter's daycare, her giggles echoing as she stacked blocks with other kids. I saved every paycheck, memorized bus routes, priced one-bedroom apartments with creaky floors but big windows. Each step felt like stitching myself back together, piece by careful piece. Lucas didn't know where I was. Allison had ensured that, but I knew he was out there, spinning his version of the truth, painting me as unstable, unhinged. Then came the call from Michael, the senior partner from the Gala. "Scarlett," he said, his voice kind but hesitant, "we're hosting a small dinner for the firm's donors. Claire and I were hoping you'd speak again." What you said at the gala, it stuck with people. I almost laughed, the irony sharp. Speak again? Risk another stage, another spotlight? But something in his tone, genuine, respectful, made me say yes. I wasn't the same woman who'd trembled under Lucas's gaze. I had something to say, and this time, it would be for me.